A 9-year-old boy with a black eye walked into a biker bar and asked the scariest man in New Mexico to marry his mother, not for love, but for the grievous actions of his dad. What happened next shook an entire town. Before we dive in, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments right now, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Now, let's get into the story. The air inside Sal's diner tasted like burnt coffee and diesel fumes. Conrad sat with his back to the corner booth, the way he always did. Eyes on the door, one hand wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. 20 Harleys sat baking in the New Mexico sun outside, chrome pipes ticking as they cooled. The lunch rush was over. Just him and 9 brothers from the club, their leather cuts creaking as they shifted in the red vinyl seats. The oscillating fan above the counter did nothing but push hot air around. Hawk was mid-sentence, something about a repo job in Santa Fe, when the door chime rang. Every head turned. Conrad's hand moved instinctively toward his belt, then stopped. It wasn't the rival club from Gallup. It wasn't cops. It was a kid. Maybe 9 years old, skinny, messy brown hair that looked like it hadn't seen a comb in days. He wore a faded blue polo shirt with the collar half-tucked, sleeves too long for his thin arms. A backpack hung off one shoulder, Star Wars characters peeling off the fabric. His sneakers were the kind you get 3 for $20 at the outlet mall, laces dragging. The boy stood in the doorway, framed by the blinding desert light behind him. He didn't move, just stared at the table of bikers like he was sizing up a firing squad. "Door closes, kid," Tiny rumbled from the end of the booth. "You in or out?" The boy stepped inside. The door hissed shut behind him. That's when Conrad saw it. The left side of the kid's face was a nightmare. A black eye. Not the playground kind, not the fell-off-my-bike kind. This was deep purple going to black, swollen so bad the kid probably couldn't see out of it. The bruise crawled from his eyebrow down to his cheekbone, angry and fresh. Maybe a day old, maybe less. The diner went silent. Forks stopped moving. Coffee mugs hovered mid-sip. Billy walked forward. His hands were shaking, fingers curling and uncurling at his sides. He walked past the counter, past the truckers pretending not to stare, straight toward the back booth where Conrad sat. The kid's good eye, brown, wet with unshed tears, locked on to him. Conrad felt something twist in his gut. He'd seen plenty of violence, dealt it out himself more times than he could count. But this was different. "You the boss?" the boy whispered. His voice cracked on the last word. Conrad leaned forward, elbows on the table. His shadow fell over the kid like a storm cloud. "I am." He kept his voice low, controlled. "You lost?" The boy swallowed hard. His jaw clenched. For a second, Conrad thought he might run. Instead, he took another step, closer. "Can you marry my mom?" Billy blurted out. "Just for today?" The table erupted in confused murmurs. Hawk shot Conrad a look that said, "What the hell?" Tiny's eyebrows disappeared into his bandana. Conrad raised a hand. Silence fell again. "Say that again, son." Billy's chin trembled. A tear slipped down his good cheek, cutting a track through the dust on his face. "My stepdad, his name's Rick. He's really big, like bigger than you." The kid gestured at Conrad's massive frame, his tattooed forearms, the scarred knuckles. "If you marry my mom, maybe he'll stop. Maybe he'll be scared of you." The words hung in the greasy air like smoke. Conrad stared at the boy, at the bruise that told a story no child should have to live. at the desperate hope flickering in that one good eye. Outside, a semi-truck roared past on Route 66, rattling the windows. "Who did that to your face, Billy?" Conrad's voice dropped to a whisper so cold it could freeze gasoline. The boy opened his mouth, and that's when the phone in Conrad's vest pocket started buzzing. He ignored it. "Answer me, kid." "Who?" Billy's voice came out smaller than before, barely audible over the hum of the fan. "Rick, my stepdad. He said if I told anyone he'd—" The phone buzzed again, insistent. Conrad's eyes never left the boy's face, but his hand moved to the table, fingers curling into a fist so tight his knuckles went white. Hawk leaned in. "Boss?" The door chime rang again. This time, everyone turned. A woman stood in the doorway. 30s maybe, thin, wearing a gas station uniform with Sarah stitched on the pocket. Her eyes were red-rimmed, darting between the bikers and the boy like a cornered animal. "Billy?" Her voice cracked. "Baby, what are you—" She saw Conrad. Saw the way her son stood in front of this mountain of a man with scars and ink and leather. Her face went pale. "Please," she whispered. "He just wanted a Coke. We're leaving. We're—" "Ma'am." Conrad stood, all 6'4", 260 of him. The booth groaned as he rose. "Your boy and I were just having a conversation." Sarah grabbed the door frame to steady herself. Billy turned to look at his mother, then back at Conrad. His small hand reached out, not for his mom, but toward Conrad's vest, fingers brushing the worn leather. "Please," the boy said again. "You're the only one big enough." Conrad looked down at those small fingers on his vest, at the purple horror blooming on the kid's face, at the mother who looked like she'd been carrying the weight of the world and finally broke. He looked at Hawk, at Tiny, at every brother in that booth. And something shifted behind Conrad's eyes, something cold and ancient and absolutely final. "Sarah," Conrad said quietly, "you and Billy want to sit down? We need to have a talk about Rick." Conrad jerked his chin toward the door. "Hawk, lock it." The VP moved fast, boots heavy on the linoleum. The deadbolt clicked with the finality of a gun chamber closing. Sarah flinched at the sound. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Nobody's leaving till I hear the whole story." Conrad's voice was steel-wrapped in velvet. He lowered himself onto one knee, massive frame folding down until he was eye-level with Billy. This close, the bruise looked worse. Yellow edges creeping toward the kid's temple, the swelling so bad it distorted his whole face. "When'd he do this, son?" Billy's good eye darted to his mother, then back. "Last night. I dropped a plate during dinner." "You drop a plate? You get a black eye?" Conrad's jaw clenched so hard a vein pulsed in his temple. "What happens when you spill milk?" The boy went quiet. Sarah took a shaking step forward. "We called the police 3 times. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Rick works at the Burlington Northern Rail Yard. Shift foreman. He drinks with half the department at Jerry's Tavern every Friday." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Last time they came out, the officer told me maybe I should try being a better wife." Tiny stood up so fast his chair screeched. "They said, what?" Conrad raised a hand. Tiny sat. "How long?" Conrad asked Sarah. 2 years. It started small, yelling, shoving. Then she looked at Billy, and something in her broke. Then he started on Billy. Said he needed to toughen up. Be a man. Conrad's knuckles cracked as he balled his fists. The sound echoed like gunshots in the silent diner. "What time does Rick get home?" Sarah checked her phone with trembling hands. 4:30. We have maybe 3 hours. 3 hours till what? Her voice dropped to nothing. Till he realizes we took his truck to come here. Till he sees Billy's backpack is missing. The implications landed like a brick. They weren't just visiting. They were running. Conrad stood and walked toward the front window. Outside, the parking lot shimmered in the heat. A beat-up Chevy sedan sat next to his Harley, one taillight held on with duct tape. "She with you?" He pointed. Billy nodded. "She's scared of you guys." "Smart woman." Conrad pushed through the door into the scorching afternoon. Sarah followed, her gas station uniform soaked with sweat and fear. He found her smoking by the Chevy, hand shaking so bad ash fell on her shoes. When she saw Conrad's shadow, she dropped the cigarette and backed against the car. "I'm not here to hurt you, ma'am." "That's what Rick said." Her voice cracked. 2 years ago, at the Applebee's on Coors Boulevard, he seemed so nice. Conrad stopped 10 feet away, giving her space. "What happens if you go back?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "He said if I ever tried to leave, he'd call CPS. Tell them I'm unfit. His cousin works there." She looked at Conrad with eyes that had given up hope. "He said he'd make sure I lost Billy forever. And he can do it. He has friends everywhere." Conrad stared at her, at the broken woman who'd been beaten down so many times she couldn't see a way out. Then he pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Panic flooded her voice. "Making a call." His thumb moved across the screen. "Rick thinks he's got friends?" The phone rang once, twice. "Wait till he sees mine." Inside the diner, through the window, Hawk was already standing. He knew that look on Conrad's face. He'd seen it before, right before the club went to war. Conrad's fist hit the table like a judge's gavel. Coffee mugs jumped. A fork clattered to the floor. Code Red. The words sucked the air out of Sal's diner. Every biker at the table went still. Code Red meant dropping everything. Code Red meant war. Hawk leaned forward, voice low. "Boss, you sure? For a kid we just met?" Conrad's eyes were black fire. "This ain't about knowing him. This is about what's right." He pointed toward the parking lot where Sarah stood with her son, both of them looking like cornered animals. That boy walked into a room full of the scariest men in New Mexico and asked for help. "You think that didn't take guts?" Tiny nodded slowly. "I'm in." "Me too," came a voice from the counter. Then another. Within seconds, every man in the diner was on his feet. Conrad pulled Billy close, kneeling again. "We're gonna handle this, son. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Billy nodded, his bruised face lighting up with something that looked like hope. That's when Hawk's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face went gray. "Boss, Sheriff Mendoza just posted on the scanner feed. Says he's looking for probable cause to raid the clubhouse. Something about stolen parts." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "That son of a—" Tiny started. Conrad held up a hand. "He's fishing. But if we roll up to Rick's place and beat him bloody, Mendoza gets his raid. We all go down." "So what do we do?" Hawk asked. "Let this piece of trash keep hurting them?" Conrad's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "No. We make him think we're going to beat him bloody." He pulled out his phone. "Difference is we don't lay a finger on him. We just show up." Tiny's eyebrows shot up. "Show up?" That's it? 50 deep, full colors, right in his driveway. Conrad's thumb moved across the screen. Rick's got friends at the rail yard and the sheriff's office. But how many friends you think he's got when there's a wall of iron parked on his lawn? Understanding dawned across the faces around the table. Conrad hit dial. The phone rang twice. Reaper? Yeah, it's Conrad. I need every rider you got. Santa Fe, Gallup, Las Cruces, I don't care. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., and I need them in full colors. He listened for a moment. No weapons. Nobody throws a punch unless he swings first. This is a show of force, nothing more. Another pause. Yeah, it's for a kid. That's all it took. Conrad could hear Reaper shouting orders in the background before the line even went dead. He dialed again and again, each call the same message. Tomorrow, 7 a.m., for a kid who needs us. Phoenix Chapter, Tucson, Flagstaff. Even the independent riders from Roswell who didn't fly colors but respected the code. The flip phones snapped shut one by one, the sound echoing like shotgun shells loading. Outside, past the heat-warped windows, something changed. The distant rumble started soft. So soft you could mistake it for thunder over the Sandia Mountains. But it grew and grew. Hawk moved to the window. Boss? Conrad joined him. On the horizon, where Highway 40 met Route 66, a line of motorcycles appeared. 20, 30, still coming. Word travels fast, Tiny muttered. Billy pressed his face against the glass, eyes wide. The rumble became a roar. The windows rattled. The neon open sign above the door flickered. Conrad checked his watch. 2:47 p.m. Rick gets home at 4:30, Sarah whispered from behind them, voice shaking. Conrad didn't turn around. He just watched the highway fill with chrome and leather. Then we've got time to make one more call. He pulled out his phone again. This time he dialed a number he hadn't used in 5 years. The line clicked. A gravelly voice answered. This better be good, Conrad. I need the full chapter. Everyone, even the retired. Silence. Then, how many we talking? Conrad looked at Billy's reflection in the window, at the purple bruise, at the hope fighting with fear in that one good eye. Enough to shake the ground. The truck smelled like stale beer and motor oil. Billy sat pressed against the passenger door while his mom drove, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Conrad's words echoed in his head. Act normal. Just one more night. One more night felt like forever. The house on Mesa Verde Drive looked the same as always. Yellow siding, dead grass, Rick's F-250 sitting in the driveway like a warning. Sarah killed the engine. Her hand found Billy's. Remember, she whispered. We went to get groceries. That's all. The front door opened before they reached it. Rick filled the frame, 6'3" of railroad muscle gone to fat, wearing a grease-stained Carhartt shirt and work boots. His face was red, beard patchy, eyes already glassy from his post-shift beers. A Coors can dangled from his meaty hand. Where the hell you been? His voice was sandpaper on concrete. I've been home 20 minutes. Albertsons? Sarah said quickly, holding up a plastic bag. We needed milk. Rick's eyes narrowed. They slid from Sarah to Billy, lingering on his face. Billy felt his stomach clench. Did the bruise look different? Could Rick tell he'd been crying? Took you long enough? Rick stepped aside, letting them pass. The house reeked of cigarettes and day-old Chinese takeout. Billy tried to slip past toward his room, but Rick's hand shot out, gripping his shoulder. The fingers dug in hard enough to bruise. "Not so fast, champ." Rick crouched down, beer breath hot on Billy's face. "You seem different. You tell anyone about your little accident last night?" Billy's heart hammered. He could see Conrad's scarred knuckles in his mind, could hear the rumble of those bikes. "Just get through tonight." "No, sir." "No?" Rick's grip tightened. "Because if you did, if you opened your mouth to anyone, teachers, neighbors, those busybody lunch ladies, I'd know. And you know what happens when you lie to me." Billy nodded, not trusting his voice. Rick shoved him backward. "Get your homework done, and don't let me hear you bothering your mother." Billy fled to his room, closing the door as quietly as possible. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely unzip his backpack. Inside, tucked under his math worksheet, was something Conrad had slipped in when he wasn't looking. A leather patch that said "Protected" in silver thread. He held it against his chest, trying to believe it meant something. Through the thin walls he could hear Rick yelling at his mom about the grocery receipt, about the price of milk, about how she couldn't do anything right. A dish shattered. His mom said, "I'm sorry," in that small, broken voice she used when Rick was on a tear. Billy pulled his pillow over his head, tears soaking the fabric. "They're coming," he told himself. Conrad promised. But what if Conrad forgot? What if it was just tough guy talk? What if Billy had made it worse by telling? He drifted toward sleep, exhausted from fear. That's when he heard it. Faint. Far away. Could have been thunder rolling down from the mountains. But it wasn't thunder. Thunder doesn't have a rhythm. Thunder doesn't sound like 50 V-twin engines running in formation. Thunder doesn't make your chest vibrate with each pulse. Billy sat up in the darkness, pressing his ear against the window. The sound was still miles away, somewhere out on I-40. But it was real. It was moving, coming closer. His bedroom door creaked open. Rick's silhouette filled the frame, backlit by the hallway light. "You hear that?" Rick's voice was different now, uncertain. Billy held his breath. The rumble grew louder. The sun cracked the horizon at 6:30 a.m., bleeding red across the Sandia Mountains. Conrad stood in the dirt parking lot of an abandoned Texaco station, watching them arrive. They came from everywhere. Phoenix. Chapter rolled in first. 12 riders in formation, their cuts catching the morning light. Then Tucson, Flagstaff, Las Cruces. Independent riders with no colors at all, just men who'd gotten the call and answered. They kept coming, filling the cracked asphalt until chrome and leather stretched 50 bikes deep. Hawk pulled up beside Conrad, killing his engine. "We got more?" "4 still on the road from Roswell." Conrad watched a gray-bearded rider dismount. Had to be 70 years old, wearing a Vietnam patch on his vest. "Told you. Word travels." The old rider approached, offering his hand. "Heard it was for a kid." Conrad nodded. 9 years old. Stepdad thinks he owns him." "Not today, he don't." The old man spat in the dirt. Conrad climbed onto a rusted oil drum, his boots scraping metal. The conversations died. 50 sets of eyes locked on him. "Rules are simple." His voice cut through the desert silence. "No weapons. I see a chain, a blade, even brass knuckles. You're out. We don't touch this man unless he swings first. Are we clear?" A chorus of clear rumbled back. "We're not riding for blood. We're riding for a boy who walked into a diner and asked for help. We are a wall of iron today. We are his family." Tiny raised his fist. "His family?" The chant spread. His family. His family. Conrad checked his watch. 6:47 a.m. Rick would be getting Billy ready for school right about now. Probably yelling. Probably worse. Mount up. The sound started like a heartbeat. 1 engine, 2, 5, 10. Then all of them. A deafening symphony of pistons and chrome that shook dust from the Texaco sign above them. The rumble rolled across the desert like an earthquake. Conrad pulled on his gloves, settling onto his Harley. The leather grips felt right. He looked down the line of bikes. An army of outcasts, united by a code older than any law. He twisted the throttle. The engine screamed. "Let's go get our boy." They pulled onto Highway 40 in formation, 2 by 2, a mile-long snake of thunder and steel. Morning commuters on the highway pulled to the shoulder, watching in stunned silence as the procession passed. The sound wasn't just loud, it was felt, vibrating through car frames and rattling windows. Mesa Verde Drive was 7 miles away. Conrad's phone buzzed in his vest. A text from Sarah. "He's getting worse. Hurry." The speedometer climbed. Behind him, 50 engines matched his pace. The suburbs appeared on the horizon, cookie-cutter houses, manicured lawns, the kind of neighborhood where people called the cops if your grass got too long. They were about to get a different kind of lawn service. Conrad signaled. The formation tightened. One more turn. And there it was. The yellow house with dead grass and Rick's F-250 in the driveway. Conrad could see a figure in the window, small, pressed against the glass. Billy. The boy had been watching for them. "Move your ass, Billy! Bus comes in 10 minutes!" Rick's voice boomed through the house at 7 o'clock a.m. sharp. He stood in the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, still wearing yesterday's shirt. Billy sat at the table, backpack already on, staring at his untouched cereal. Sarah hovered by the sink, her back to them both. Rick raised the mug to his lips and stopped. The coffee was moving. Tiny ripples spread across the surface, concentric circles that shouldn't exist. His beer gut started vibrating. The windows began to hum. "The hell?" Rick set the mug down. The ripples got worse. Then the sound hit, low at first, a distant thunder that built and built until the cheap vinyl flooring buzzed beneath their feet. The pictures on the wall rattled. The refrigerator shook. A glass fell from the counter and shattered. Rick moved to the window, yanking back the curtain. His face went white. They came around the corner like a tidal wave of chrome and leather. 50 motorcycles, 2 by 2, engines screaming in perfect formation. They didn't slow down. They turned into the cul-de-sac and kept coming, onto the sidewalk, across the lawn, up the driveway, everywhere. The pristine suburban street became an invasion zone. Mrs. Patterson from next door screamed. Mr. Chen dropped his garbage bag. Car alarms wailed as the vibrations set them off. Rick stood frozen in the doorway, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. Conrad killed his engine. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise. 50 men dismounted in unison, leather creaking, boots hitting pavement like a firing squad loading. Billy pressed his face against the living room window, his good eye wide. Conrad walked up the driveway. Not fast, not slow, just inevitable, like death or taxes. He stepped past Rick like he was furniture. "Excuse me," Conrad said flatly. Rick's voice came out strangled. "Who the... You can't just..." Conrad knelt in front of Billy, ignoring Rick completely. Up close, the boy's bruise looked worse in the morning light. Yellows and purples spreading toward his temple. "Ready for school, son?" Billy nodded so hard his whole body shook. "Yes, sir." Good man. Conrad stood, putting a hand on Billy's shoulder. He looked at Sarah. Ma'am. She burst into tears. Rick finally found his voice, stepping between Conrad and the door. Now wait just a goddamn minute. This is my house. You can't... Conrad turned. Slowly. Behind him, 50 bikers took a single step forward. The synchronized movement made Rick stumble backward into his own doorframe. We're his ride today, Conrad said, his voice carrying across the lawn. Neighbors were recording on their phones now, standing on porches in their bathrobes. And we'll be checking his homework every day from now on. He took a step closer to Rick. The height difference was biblical. Conrad looking down, Rick forced to crane his neck up. Problem? Rick's mouth worked, but no sound came. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air. That's when Billy saw it, the exact moment his stepdad's power evaporated. Rick, the giant who'd made him small for 2 years, suddenly looked like what he really was. A coward. Conrad held out a helmet to Billy. Let's go, son. Don't want to be late. Billy took the helmet with shaking hands. It was too big, wobbling on his head, but it felt like a crown. Sarah grabbed her purse. I'm coming too. Rick reached for her arm. Sarah, you can't... Hawk stepped forward. I wouldn't. Rick's hand dropped. Conrad walked Billy toward his Harley, and 50 engines roared to life simultaneously. The sound shook leaves from the trees, but then Rick did something stupid. He grabbed Billy's backpack, yanking the boy backward. He's not going anywhere with... The engines cut out. The silence was deafening. Conrad turned around very, very slowly. Conrad's boots scraped pavement. Each step toward Rick sounded like a countdown. Rick's hand was still clamped on Billy's backpack. His knuckles were white. His breath came in short gasps. Around him, the neighborhood had become a gallery, phones recording from every porch, faces pressed against windows, Mrs. Patterson clutching her pearls like she was watching a murder. Let go of the boy. Conrad's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried like a gunshot. Rick's hand trembled. He looked at the wall of leather and chrome behind Conrad. 50 men, stone-faced, not one of them blinking. He looked at the cameras, at the witnesses, at his own shaking reflection in Conrad's sunglasses. His fingers opened. Billy stumbled forward into Conrad's shadow. Smart choice, Conrad said. Rick tried to salvage something, anything. Sarah, get back in the house now. But Sarah didn't move toward the door. She moved away from it, away from Rick. She stood beside Conrad, her gas station uniform wrinkled from a sleepless night, mascara smudged, but her spine was straighter than it had been in 2 years. I'm packing a bag, she said quietly, and I'm taking Billy. Rick's face went from white to red. You walk out that door with these criminals, and you're not coming back. You hear me? I'll call my cousin at CPS. You'll do nothing. Sarah's voice cracked, but she didn't stop. Because they know now. Everyone knows. She gestured at the cameras, at Mr. Chen still holding his garbage bag, at the postal truck that had stopped mid-route to watch. The whole neighborhood is watching you, Rick. The red drained from Rick's face. Tiny stepped forward, 6'6" of solid mechanic, arms like tree trunks, with a gray beard that reached his chest. He moved past Rick like the man was invisible and crouched in front of Billy. Heavy backpack, little man, Tiny rumbled, his voice surprisingly gentle. He slipped the Star Wars backpack off Billy's shoulders and swung it onto his own back. The thing looked tiny against his massive frame. There. Better? Billy nodded, eyes wide. Tiny pulled a helmet from his saddlebag, black with silver flames. "My grandson's. Should fit." He settled it on Billy's head, adjusting the strap with surprising care. The helmet wobbled slightly, but it stayed. "Perfect," Tiny said. "You look like a real rider now." Billy's good eye filled with tears. But this time, they weren't from fear. Conrad turned back to Rick, who stood on his own porch looking smaller with every passing second. The neighborhood was dead silent except for the hum of idling engines. Conrad stepped close. Very close. His voice dropped to a whisper that only Rick could hear. Rick's face went from red to gray. His jaw slackened. His eyes widened with something primal. The kind of fear that comes when you realize you're not the biggest predator anymore. "Understand?" Conrad whispered. Rick nodded frantically. "Good." Conrad stepped back, his voice returning to normal volume. "Billy, mount up. School starts in 30 minutes. Billy climbed onto the back of Conrad's Harley, his small arms wrapping around Conrad's waist. The helmet was too big and the bike was too loud, and his stepfather was watching from the porch looking like he might throw up, and Billy couldn't stop smiling. Sarah got on behind Hawk. She didn't look back at the house, not once. Conrad raised his hand. 50 engines revved in unison, a deafening proclamation that echoed off every house on Mesa Verde Drive. They pulled out in formation, 2 by 2, Billy on the lead bike with Conrad. The neighbors watched them go, phones still recording, witnessing the moment a small boy became untouchable. Rick stood alone on his porch, watching the taillights disappear around the corner. His hands were shaking. His shirt was soaked with sweat. Behind him, inside the house, his phone started ringing. He walked inside like a condemned man and picked it up. "Rick?" The voice on the other end was his shift supervisor at the rail yard. "Just got a very interesting phone call. We need to talk about your employment. And Rick, don't bother coming in today." The line went dead. Rick stood in his empty kitchen, in his empty house, finally understanding what Conrad had whispered. And miles away, heading toward John Adams Elementary School, with the sun rising behind them, Billy felt the wind drying his tears and heard Conrad's voice rumble over the engine noise. "You did good, son. Real good." Billy held on tighter. For the first time in 2 years, he felt safe. The procession rolled down Central Avenue like a parade nobody expected. Traffic lights turned green and stayed green, or maybe the cops just cleared the way. Cars pulled to the shoulder. A UPS driver stopped mid-delivery to film. A woman in a Prius held up her phone, live streaming to TikTok. Billy sat on the back of Conrad's Harley, his too big helmet wobbling with every bump, his arms wrapped tight around Conrad's leather vest. The wind hit his face, cold and clean, drying the tears that had been stuck there for 2 years. He wasn't small anymore, wasn't invisible, wasn't the kid who ate lunch alone. He was the boy with 50 brothers behind him. They turned onto Carlisle Boulevard. John Adams Elementary appeared ahead, a low brick building with a flagpole and a playground full of monkey bars Billy never got to use because of Tyler Braxton and his crew. Conrad slowed. The formation tightened. They entered the drop-off zone at 7:42 a.m., exactly 18 minutes before first bell. The noise hit the building like an airstrike. Inside Mrs. Henderson's third-grade classroom, pencils stopped. Heads turned toward the windows. In the gym, Coach Murray blew his whistle, and the basketball game froze. The principal, Mr. Vasquez, dropped his coffee mug. It shattered on the tile, splashing across his khakis. 50 motorcycles idled in the drop-off zone, the horseshoe driveway, the visitor parking, the bus lane. Everywhere, chrome glinting in the morning sun. Leather vests with patches from Phoenix to Flagstaff. Kids pressed their faces against the glass. Teachers rushed to the windows. Someone pulled the fire alarm by accident, or maybe on purpose, and the bell started clanging. Tyler Braxton stood by the school gate, his crew of wannabe tough guys behind him. They were the ones who'd shoved Billy into lockers, knocked his lunch tray, called him names that made teachers pretend they didn't hear. Tyler's face went white. Conrad killed his engine. The sudden silence was louder than the noise. He dismounted, then lifted Billy off like he weighed nothing, setting him gently on the pavement. Billy's legs were shaky. Conrad kept a hand on his shoulder. "You good?" Billy nodded, but his eyes were on Tyler. On the gate. On the walk. He'd have to make alone once Conrad left. Conrad knelt, bringing himself to Billy's level one last time. From his vest pocket, he pulled out a leather patch, 4 inches square, hand-stitched, silver thread on black leather, spelling out one word: protected. "This isn't a club patch," Conrad said, pressing it into Billy's palm. "But it means something. It means you got brothers now. Not by blood, by choice." He tapped Billy's chest, right over his heart. "Family isn't always blood, kid. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most." Billy's throat was too tight to speak. "Tyler gives you trouble?" Conrad glanced at the bully by the gate. "You let me know." Tiny stepped forward, his massive frame blocking out the sun. He handed Billy his backpack, the Star Wars one that suddenly felt lighter. "We'll be around, little man. You ain't alone." Conrad stood, keeping his hand on Billy's shoulder, and together they walked toward the gate. 50 bikers fell in behind them, boots hitting pavement in rhythm. Tyler and his crew backed up, and up, and up, until they hit the fence with nowhere left to go. Conrad stopped at the gate. He looked at Tyler. Just looked, didn't say a word. Tyler's eyes dropped to his shoes. Conrad turned to Billy. "Go get 'em, son." Billy walked through the gate, his classmates parted like water. The hallway stretched before him, the same hallway where he'd been shoved and tripped and made to feel small. But this time, he wasn't small. Behind him, 50 engines revved in perfect unison, a thunderous goodbye that rattled the windows and made the flag on the pole snap in the backdraft. Billy turned at the door, one hand clutching the protected patch, the other raised in a small wave. Conrad raised his fist in salute. The engines roared one more time, and then they were gone, pulling out of the parking lot in formation, leaving only the echo and the smell of gasoline and the absolute certainty that Billy's world had changed forever. Mr. Vasquez stood in his office, phone in hand, frozen mid-dial to the police. He slowly hung up. In the hallway, Billy walked to his locker. Kids who'd never spoken to him whispered. Tyler Braxton kept his distance. Billy opened his locker and pinned the protected patch to the inside door where he'd see it every day. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Have a good day at school. We're watching. C." Billy smiled. But in the parking lot, as the last bikes disappeared around the corner, someone else was watching too. A sedan with tinted windows sat across the street. Inside, a man in a sheriff's uniform lowered his binoculars. Sheriff Mendoza picked up his radio. "Yeah, dispatch. I need all available units. We got a situation." 2 weeks later, Sal's diner smelled the same, burnt coffee and diesel fumes. But everything else had changed. Sheriff Mendoza had shown up that morning at the school with 3 cruisers, lights flashing, ready to make arrests. But Mr. Vasquez, standing in the parking lot with 100 witnesses holding phone footage, had told him the truth. They didn't break a single law. They just gave a kid a ride to school. Mendoza left empty-handed. By noon, the story had hit the local news. By evening, it was national. Rick never came home. The yellow house on Mesa Verde Drive sat empty for 3 days before neighbors saw him loading boxes into his F-250 at 2 a.m. He drove east without saying goodbye, without asking for his things, without looking back. Word on the street said he took a job in Oklahoma, working nights at a warehouse where nobody knew his name. Sarah filed for divorce papers that Friday. Billy never saw Rick again. Now, Billy sat in the back booth of Sal's, right where Conrad always sat. His black eye had healed to a faint yellow shadow. His Star Wars backpack hung on the hook beside him. He wore a clean blue polo shirt and a grin that hadn't left his face in 14 days. "Eat your fries, kid," Hawk said, stealing one off Billy's plate. "Growing boys need fuel." Billy laughed and smacked his hand away. Conrad set down his coffee mug, the same chipped ceramic one from 2 weeks ago. "You know what I told your stepdad that morning? When I whispered?" Billy leaned in, eyes wide. "What?" "I told him, we know where you work. We know where you drink. If this boy has one new scratch, we won't come to talk next time." Conrad's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. Sometimes the threat is enough. You don't always need the fist. Tiny walked in, bell chiming above the door. He dropped a small package on the table in front of Billy. "What's this?" Billy asked. "Open it." Billy tore the paper. Inside was a leather vest, small, kid-sized, with clean edges and careful stitching. On the back, in silver thread, it read, "Honorary Member," and below that, road name, Brave. Billy's hands trembled as he held it up. "For me?" "You walked into a room full of the scariest men in New Mexico and asked for help," Conrad said. "That's braver than most grown men I know. You earned that name." Tiny helped Billy into the vest. It fit perfectly. Billy stood up, turning so everyone could see. The diner erupted in applause, not just from the bikers, but from Sal behind the counter, from the truckers at the window booths, from Mrs. Patterson, who'd come in for her morning tea. Conrad stood, placing both hands on Billy's shoulders. "Family isn't always blood, Brave. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most. You're one of us now." Billy hugged Conrad so hard his small arms barely reached halfway around. Conrad hugged him back, this mountain of scars and leather, and for a moment the diner was silent except for the hum of the oscillating fan. Outside, engines roared to life. Not a threat this time, a celebration. Billy walked out into the New Mexico sun wearing his vest, climbed onto the back of Conrad's Harley, and held on tight as they pulled onto Route 66. 2 weeks ago, a boy with a black eye had walked into this diner trembling and alone, asking strangers for help he didn't think he deserved. Today, that same boy rode into the desert wind with 50 brothers behind him, wearing a vest that said, "Brave," finally understanding what he'd always been. Blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family. If you believe that family isn't always blood, that sometimes the scariest-looking people have the biggest hearts, and that real men protect those who can't protect themselves, then like and share this story. Subscribe now for more stories. Also check out the 2 videos showing on the screen right now. specially crafted for you.